So, Walter, maybe you could talk a little bit more about alternative funding strategies. We're always looking for new sources. Can you talk a little bit about grants or foundations that maybe aren't so well known?
I'll just maybe reiterate, expand a little bit on the comment I made earlier about grant funding from foundations. There's I think a growing interest in foundations in stepping into this valley of death or the gap, as people have termed it, between preclinical academic research and being able to be far enough along that and with enough of your risk removed that it becomes an attractive investment for professional investors like venture capital firms. There are foundations in almost every disease out there. Some of them are stronger than others. There are diseases that are easier to talk about. Cancer has been one that people feel very passionate about. Diseases like alcoholism and so forth are much harder for foundations to find supporters that want to talk about family issues or be supportive of those kinds of things. So there's some variation as you look across the field of medicine and where medical need exists. But those types of foundations have passionate backers, and people with deep pockets, and they have actually quite a source of capital. If it takes $1 million to take something from an idea to a point of, if you spend that money carefully, to a point of being sufficiently validated that you can attract venture capital money, a foundation can be just the ticket for being able to make that happen. And they often like to work, of course, with venture capital groups to help advance ideas that have already been discovered and are out there and known. So I think that's really an area that's been particularly important as you talked about some of the Series A funding. The questions about innovation in this country, that's certainly an area that I would look to be helpful for a lot of different entrepreneurs.
I've also noticed too that there has been a dramatic increase in the last 10 years in the sophistication of asset allocation, investment type, and fundraising, frankly, from these foundations. And I really, there may be better examples, but I think back to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, some of the work that they did in the late 90s. And Stuart and I actually worked when he was at Aurora Biosciences. That was a very early CF fund grant, I believe, that has subsequently been acquired by Vertex and is now, arguably going to reach the market in a subset of CF patients next year. So not only have we, I think a lot of groups have seen the success of the CF Foundation model and are trying to emulate that, but we're also now actually seeing some of the successes actually come out the other end, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I'll just comment on, adding to Ted's comments, I was thinking exactly the same as you actually, Ted. So we worked directly with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, and this was the time, as Ted says, 10 years ago, when many of these foundations were doing, they'd scatter the money around. $100,000 to an academic lab here, $100,000 there. And we spent a lot of time talking to CF to say, it's just not worth our while working with you if it's going to be a sort of a grant type of thing. And the CF made a very courageous decision. They basically said, look, we've got a fair amount of money here, but instead of backing, a very large number of small individual labs with minimal grants, we're going to put a small amount of money. We're going to back a small number of institutions, Aurora being one of them, with large amounts of money. And so Aurora came out of what was a very long consultative process with CF, in which they brought a tremendous degree of, they brought advisors, they brought their internal advisory boards, they brought external scientists, external clinicians, physicians, to this decision, and it resulted in a very large grant from the CF Foundation, tens and tens of millions of dollars. Now that has continued with Vertex as well. As Ted mentioned, we're now looking at 2 compounds there, which came out of the original Aurora Labs, which in one case it can actually correct the CF function, and the other it can manage the disease. But these are major breakthroughs, and the CF Foundation deserves a lot of credit because they took a lot of criticism at the time for making this decision to cut off funding to a number of small academic labs and to rechannel the money to bigger deals, and Aurora being one of the first examples of that. But that money made a big difference, and although CF, I've lost track of the numbers about that, I would guess maybe it's $100 million has gone into Aurora Vertex now. That has made a real difference, and we're probably looking at a major breakthrough in CF. So I do think that These foundations, Lynn, that you're talking about, if they can be strategic in the way they go about it, and if they've got a chief executive like Bob Bell at the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, courageous to do it, they can make a huge impact on drug discovery and development at a time when it's getting squeezed from more traditional sources.
And we've also seen government too step in more and more over the last 3 to 5 years, whether it's DARPA funding or Defense Threat Reduction Agency. So there's also been that whole avenue, which I don't think was nearly as broad or as open to public and private companies as it was even 5-7 years ago.
It was that the universities themselves are trying to do something like that to help do translational research and bridge the gap, quote unquote, setting up their own sort of quasi-venture funds to help move technologies forward, and setting up activities like medicinal chemistry programs and so forth, screening programs on the biology side to try to help their own staff, entrepreneurs within their institutions, as well as others to be successful in bringing technology to the point where it's sufficiently de-risked that in today's economic financial market climate, investors can get behind it and take it forward.
But to that point, the foundations and even the universities can also help in de-risking, or at least helping to move forward ideas on the regulatory side. Because, think about therapeutic areas like depression or even obesity or diabetes. There's a number of products and programs that aren't going to get through because we don't have clarity on the regulatory side. And, even Janet Woodcock made the comment that they're worried that the industry's going to complain that we're not getting enough innovation out of it, or approvals out of the industry, but they're not seeing enough to approve. And that whole catch-22 is pretty ferocious right now. But the foundations and even the universities are another set of voices that can carry a lot of weight in that regard.
Do you have a question?
Yes. I'd like to know if you could speak to both the positives and the negatives of an early stage whether it's a biotech or a device company, making a strategic partnership with a large pharma or a large biotech company, how the VCs would view it when they're going for later stage financing, and also how the public markets would view that.
Well, I think it's just depends on what's in the company. If it's a single asset and we're financing that single asset and you're going to give away the rights for that asset to a corporate partner, then we basically sold the company in a different way. So, in fact, the Plexicon story, if you look back in the history of Plexicon, was a little bit like that. And the board and the investors there had to make a decision. If we did this big collaboration with Roche, did we have enough confidence in the platform and in the discovery capabilities to develop more, to add value and not just be linked to this already sold process? And it was a very important decision that was made, and it played it out. But that's the real important aspect. If it's a single asset and you license it out, what do you have? A license and a single asset. That may be great for a company that may not be institutionally financed. It could be something the angel investors might love because they'll get the ongoing annuity stream from that. But for an institutional investor, VC investor particularly, it's a tougher scenario. You may want to.
I'd add a little color to that. So I think it is very much, as Art said, a case-by-case basis where it really depends on the situation. One thing I would say is that the terms of those deals are crucial to how it's perceived. And I'm not even just talking upfront dollars, which is sort of all people get credit for, all people really focus on today. And I might point back to Plexicon too, because I think one of the great things that